Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is an incredible bright light in the universe. And you may or may not know her, but this morning we are honored to introduce her to all of our listeners and viewers. Her name is Alexis Jones. She's an internationally recognized speaker, media personality, activist, and author. Even more than that, she recently won in 2018 the Jefferson Award. You may not know what it is, but it's our country's highest national honor for public service, alongside Shaquille O'Neal and Brian Stevenson. She has done amazing things, like been featured as Oprah's #1 Super Soul 100, AOL's Makers, and she was an ambassador for L'Oreal's STEM project or initiative. She's also the founder of I Am That Girl and Protect Her. This morning, she joins us from Austin, Texas, to talk about her journey, but how all things are possible to those who believe and just don't quit. Alexis Jones, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You make me proud to say that I am a woman. You are incredible. I want to rewind back to that young girl who didn't start at the beginning of the line, who your life could have turned out so differently if your mother had not instilled in you that work ethic and that never say die spirit. Tell me about the beginning and growing up as a young girl.
Yeah, I think growing up for me, it was always straddling two worlds. I grew up a girl with not a lot of money in a very wealthy community. And so I had access and was certainly proximate to what was possible.
So how do those things come together? I grew up in a wealthy community with not a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Those things don't jive. How does that happen?
They definitely don't jive. And I have these, horror stories of my not wanting my mom to pick us up in the 1976 jaundice color Malibu that she had. And I'd be like, no, I'll meet you 2 blocks away. And so there's this very real practicality of wanting to hide that. And I think learning at a really young age, the whole notion of life isn't fair. Because I could see all these things that were possible and they were possible for my friends. And I didn't know how to justify that inside my 10, 11-year-old brain of, well, why don't we have those things? And when I go over to their huge monstrosities of homes, and then I come back to our home. And so I think it was learning to kind of be this chameleon in between two worlds and learning how to fit into both of those worlds, because there is so much unspoken invisible lines within any ecosystem, and learning how to gracefully navigate that and knowing when to put what hat on, I think is a big part of what has made.
How do you find your true self though, in that kind of environment where you wanna be in the in crowd, because the in crowd has privilege and has things, but over here you're not the poorest of the poor, but you don't necessarily fit with mm-hmm. that crowd. How do you find your authentic self between those two worlds?
I think you're actually confronted even more so with the invitation to find out who you are in spite of your circumstances. Because I think so often our circumstances can be compounded into who we think we are when you live in this comfortable bubble of this is who I am, whether you grow up in poverty, whether you grow up in affluence, when you're not confronted with things that have that inherent friction. I think that you're like, oh no, this is who I am. And I think when you're put into so many different situations that are inherently uncomfortable, I think it actually forces you to say, well, who am I? Because I know that I can be this, and I know that I can be that, and I know that I can, all these different buckets resonate. But what is the bucket potentially that resonates the most for me? And I think the truth is we don't even understand the dynamicism that exists inside of every one of us. And the truth is all of it belongs. All of it is possible. So identifying an authentic self, I think we're mercurial by nature. And so the idea that at a young age I was able to, and that's why I think it's such a blessing that I was kind of straddling these different worlds. And that's one of many worlds that I learned to straddle, because I think it revealed more about myself, more about me rather, that I wouldn't have had access to had I just grown up comfortable in whatever world, in one world.
And so when you look at your mother's beginning and her life and all of the challenges that she lived through, how then do you understand breaking the cycle of teen pregnancy, the cycle of abuse, the cycle of, generations doing pretty much the same thing? How does she have that conversation, or does she have that conversation with you as a young girl?
Sure. I mean, I think we definitely, even when it came to relationships, of course, because she got pregnant at 16, I think my mom was certainly on the spectrum of was having very taboo conversations with me far younger than most, because she was like, this is the world. So
she was a girl herself.
She was a girl herself. And so she said, listen, this is a real world. We're going to talk about these things that are hard to talk about, because if anyone gets credit for breaking a cycle and having the Constitution at 16 years old to break cyclical behaviors of abuse, of poverty, of lack of education, I think that the only way she knew how to get us from ever backstepping was to say, we're going to talk about all this stuff. We're going to talk about all the hard things that most people would be like, I want to erase my past, and this is where we're headed, and stay focused. And it's almost like if you can't embrace and own your story, including your past, including your brokenness, including the adversity and the challenges and the face plants, if we can't own that and say, that's part of me too, and that's part of who I am, and I carry that with pride because it's absolutely gotten me to where I'm headed, I think it allows us to revisit and make those mistakes again.
But at the time when your mother started having this conversation with you, were you able to completely embrace it at that time? Or was there a little bit of shame, a little bit of inferiority? Was there a little of those emotions that the enemy can give to us about who we are?
I think even scarier is the opposite, is that it felt so far from me. Her reality, because she had presented such a different possibility for me, the thought of that felt so foreign. Because everyone in my family was educated, because that was so important to her. And I was the 5th kid. So everyone was going to prestigious universities, So when she would talk about her upbringing, I'd be like, what? That's crazy. What do you mean grandma only had an 8th grade education? How do you even quit school at that age? What do you mean you got pregnant at 16? I'm 16 right now. I can't fathom having a kid. And so I think that's why she felt it was imperative to talk about her upbringing, talk about the pain points, and talk about it, because she's like, we are not that far from that, right? That is one generation away from you. And if at any point you think that you're above that, at any point that you think you're above addiction, at any point you think that is the enemy's first stronghold, is you thinking that doesn't relate to you.
And thinking that he doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she wants unequivocally better for her children than what she had. And then she starts pounding that in. She starts planting those seeds. And now you see it from your siblings. You see the possibility. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about going off to college and then charting your own path and what God has planted and impregnated you with, and how you begin to birth. Stay on point, everybody. We're going to take a break here, but we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning, Alexis Jones. She is one of those incredible people that really helps us all understand that if you fight and you don't give up, the possibilities are endless. And so you go through all of this in your childhood, and you know that you've got to work harder and longer than anybody else to be successful. So you go off to college and you get the monies, I guess, through scholarships and through hard work. And tell me about college and what that's like for you.
I think high school was similar to college in that because of my upbringing, I knew I didn't have a safety net. I always knew in the back of my head that I was going to have to provide for myself and provide the lifestyle that I wanted. And so I was a very serious student. And I think I had a different level of seriousness because
Were
I'm
you
always
smart naturally, or did you have to work to be smart?
Oh, I had to work so hard. I learned to read really late. And so this is actually kind of a funny story. When I was in 5th grade, and when you're going into middle school, they would write down on, and it was 3 different options. It was regular, advanced, or honors. And the teachers had bumped me up to regular in all of my classes. And then your parents had to sign off on it. And if they didn't agree, then they could, change it, but they would have to sign it. And apparently in 5th grade, so I'm trying to also understand, and of course I get this from my mom, I'm trying to understand the 10-year-old who's like, nope, put me in the wrong classes. I should be in honors, like not even advanced. I should be in honors when they'd already bumped me up. And so I changed all of them to honors. And then I signed my mom's name. And I brought in the form, and of course they called my mom, and there ended up being this entire conversation about it. And I knew, and what I told my teacher when I sat down, I got in trouble, of course, for forging my mother's signature. But when I sat down, I remember as a 10-year-old saying, you're putting me in the wrong classes, just give me a chance. And if I can't hack it, if I can't keep up, if I can't whatever, so be it. But like, just give me a shot to be great and let me prove it to you. And I think that was the work ethic that I got from my mom. The work ethic was, it's not just a sense of entitlement of I deserve to be at the top. I deserve to sidestep everyone who's in line. It's that I'm going to manifest and create my own opportunities. And when I do, I know deep down inside that my work ethic is going to back me up.
And it's going to make room for you. Your gifts and talents are going to make room for you. And they do. And so you get pregnant with, I am that girl. And so tell me about the conception.
So it started at USC, and I was sitting down with 6 girls that were actually in my Bible study. And we were sitting.
When did your relationship with God become real for you? Do you remember?
Yeah, my dad led my youth group growing up. So I was certainly really grateful to be in that kind of ecosystem. My grandparents were very, very involved in our church. But I would really say that it was when I started going to summer camp. I went to a summer camp called Laity Lodge, which was a Christian sports camp in Texas that my brothers had also gone to. And I joke to this day, I tell my husband every summer, I'm like, I'm going to apply and maybe get a job. And, in spite of like my real jobs. But it was so impactful. And I would say that summer camp amplified anything that I ever thought I knew or understood about God and about Christianity and about Jesus in theory. That colored it for me. That gave me a relationship with God in a way that I don't know if I had ever really gotten that just from the ecosystem that I was living in Austin, even though we were going to church every single Sunday. But there was something about that. It was my friends that I made there who are still friends to this day. And it was the best 2 weeks of my life every single year. So I would say that had a huge impact.
And so then God gives you the idea of I am that girl. When did you first get that in your spirit?
I sat down with 6 girls who were in my Bible study, and I said, we have a lot of conversations about things that don't matter, clothes and shoes and boys and movies, and they're great, they're fun. I said, but what if once a week we had conversations about things that did matter? Would that interest you, and would you come? And they said yes. And for that meeting, we met, and it was 6 of us. And 6 meetings later, we had 347 girls showing up. And there was something that was palpable, that providing the sanctuary where, regardless of the matrix of diversity, all are welcome. And it was a place where girls, we could set down our swords and our armor, because we're so mean to each other, and we're even meaner to ourselves. And it's such poor programming. And so coming in and saying, we're going to set all that programming aside.
Was everybody able to set it aside and not bring their mean selves?
The newbies were always like, what? Right? Because they were like, I don't know about this. And then the girls who'd been coming were like, no, trust me. Like, and I think it is our true nature as women. We have a predilection, I think, inside of our DNA that God has hardwired us for community and nurturing. And I think that it's something really beautiful about who we are and whose we are. And I think that in the midst of that, it was really offering these women, these young women, a space to come back to their true self, of saying like, we actually don't have to be threatened and catty and, and mean to each other. Why don't we come here and like, let's actually be our true nature, which is, the kindergarten version of ourselves, when you have the courage and the confidence, and the kindness to walk up to a stranger in your class and be like, hi, I'm Alexis. Will you be my friend? We don't have all the trappings of our ego saying like, no, you got to play it cool. No, you got to be this way. And so I think it was contagious, and girls were like dragging their friends and saying, you have to come to this. We're having these conversations about the world and real life 101 and relationships and boundaries and stress and figuring out school and what our passion and our purpose and, all these things that I didn't really feel like there was a space, certainly for me, to be exploring all of these different issues. And I wanted to do it in a place where I could ask the hard questions and the questions that I was too insecure to ask somewhere else. And so I think that was, and then to answer your question more definitively, it was in the moment that I realized so many people were showing up and that I wasn't the only one in desperate need in search of this rich community.
And so not only is this a rich community, but it's a safe place for women to just be themselves and to take the mask off. But as it grows, then you don't necessarily have a platform to grow it, but you get this idea from one of your professors. Tell us about that.
My professor, Christopher Smith, who still teaches at USC.
You'll never forget him.
Never. No, he's like a very dear friend. I adore this man. He had one of the biggest impacts on my life, especially as a professor. And he was giving this lecture on reality TV and the impact that it has.
What did he say about it? What was the most impactful thing that he said about reality TV?
It was the instantaneous platform and the amplification of someone that could happen overnight. That up until that point, any kind of influence and celebrity came out of monstrous work in years of beating down doors and getting tiny roles and then bigger roles and then bigger roles. But we didn't have a distribution platform to create this almost instantaneous fame. And so it was this phenomenon, because in 2005, when I was in grad school, it was this phenomenon that you had these no-name people, and within 3 weeks of being on this reality TV show, suddenly they had this huge following and this huge audience. And so it was building personal brands, whether people were that intentional or not about it. And that was where he was coming from. It was a class about marketing and the entertainment industry and creating brands. And now for the first time, we were really seeing personal brands being created, and that being a driving force for different companies and ideas. And so I ran to his office hours and I was like, oh my God. Hold
that thought. She ran to his office after that lecture. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we're going to tell you which reality TV show that helped her birth I Am That Girl. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning, Alexis Jones, takes us through her journey and really inspires us never to quit. Because that's how I felt when I read your story and understood the work, because it is easy to quit when you don't see a way to really birth the thing that God has given you. You know, the word says God shows us the end from the beginning. And so everything that's in the middle, we don't necessarily understand the challenges that brings. And so when you get this information that reality TV is a way to propel your idea into the stratosphere, you go to your professor and you say what to him?
I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but what if I get on a reality TV show? Would you help me strategically utilize it in order to promote and to launch I Am That Girl? And he said,
what did he say?
He was like, first he started laughing. He was like, do you ever, because I was always coming to his office hours and, and he gave me a hard time because I'd be like, I just read this incredible excerpt of like Martin Luther King Jr. I just read this about Gandhi. And can you believe, like, how did they, I was always this like big idea dreamer and trying to capture the spirit and the essence of people who had the ability to not just build successful Fortune 100 companies, but really had the ability to like transform paradigms. And so when I came, so every time I came in, he would always be like, what now, Jones? Like, what's your latest? And so I presented this idea and he kind of started laughing and I was like, no, you just gave this very compelling lecture on how impactful and how influential and how you can launch a brand almost overnight. So if I can get on a TV show, would you help me utilize it? Could we be really intentional and strategic and like a wolf in sheepskin and launch this organization that I'm passionate about? And he responded and said, yeah, sure. Go get on a reality TV show because that's easy. And come back. And when you've done that, then we'll talk. And so I called in a favor from a friend and I got Mark Burnett's production company address for the TV show Survivor. And I basically made a video.
Not just any reality show, but probably the toughest reality show.
The granddaddy.
Not like going on the Kardashians or something, but Survivor.
Yeah. And it was actually really funny because I made my video that day, which I always say is like the testament of a good friend. I called my best guy friend and I said, you have to meet me at my house right now. We have to make a video. I'm going to be on Survivor. And he didn't even bat an eye. He was like, I'll go get my camera. I'll be right there. And I'm like, that's part of this story is like, you have to enroll people in your crazy. You have to enroll people in the possibility that anything is possible. And the fact that he wasn't like, what, why, you, how, nothing, was just like, yeah, okay, great, let's do that. And then I'm driving over and I call my dad and he answers and I said, Daddy, will you pray with me real quick? Because I'm headed over to Mark Burnett's production company. He said, what, why, what do you, and I said, well, you always said when two people come in the name of the Lord, anything is possible. And so I was wondering if you would pray with me so that I can get on Survivor. And he was like, sweetheart, I don't think that's how this works. I don't know. And I was like, well, you're the one who said, like, we can pray for anything. And, all this stuff. And he was like, oh, geez, okay. And I was like, said a prayer on the way over. And I came walking up and, it's all locked down and you can't just walk into a studio like that. And I hit the call box button and a very gruff voice came over in a little camera. I was like, on my face. And they said, hello, who are you here to see? And I panicked because I couldn't tell them how and why I was there. I couldn't out my friend basically. And I said, I'm here for Cecilia. And I've never met a Cecilia in my whole life. And I don't know that that's what came out of my mouth. And he responds, Cecilia. And I said, I think that's her name. And he was like, oh, okay. Yeah, one sec. And the door's open. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to explain to this woman? I don't even know who this woman is. And I walked to the front desk and this incredible woman, she goes, oh, honey, my name is Cynthia. No one ever gets it right. What can I do for you? And we start chatting. And she said, what are you doing here?
I call that favor.
Yeah, all day. And I said, well, I'm here for Survivor. And she goes, oh my gosh, you're one of the 48, finalists that they just flew in for the final interview. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, that's how, she ends up sending me in and it ends up being this crazy fiasco of them being like, how the heck did you get in here? And I basically told them, I got through your entire security. I think it's in your best interest to cast me for the show. And they were like, that's, Mark Burnett, I'll never forget, he's like, well, that's very compelling. So yeah. So I ended up getting cast and I went back to my professor and I said, you're never going to believe this. And that whole notion, I grew up in high school seeing those like cheesy posters of Wayne Gretzky. And it's like, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And I always say you miss 100% of the shots that you never take. And so that's why this preparation meeting opportunity, you manifest that opportunity. You don't wait for someone to call on you. You don't wait for someone to pick you out of a crowd. You don't wait for someone to offer you your dream job. You go and you make it. And then when you are given this golden favor, this golden opportunity, then you're like, heck yeah, I am prepared. I am ready. This is meant for me. And so I'm a huge fan of manifesting and creating and co-authoring a life, but not sitting back and waiting for someone to write a script for me.
And so you go on Survivor and you stay there 33 days. What was that like?
It was awful. I would say they would never tell people what really goes down because I don't think it would be good TV. I broke my hand on the first challenge that we ever had. I think that was technically day 1. They didn't show that. I macheted my foot on day 19. They didn't show that. I was stung by one of the world's most poisonous scorpions that happened to live on our island 3 different times. They never aired that. And then I kind of blew out my left knee on day 31. Didn't show that. So, and then that's not even just the torrential rain pour that they show, like 2-minute segment, you know, of like, oh, rain is so bad. Next morning it's like beautiful and sunny. And you're like, that lasted 14 hours. And when you have we were the worst. I mean, we couldn't build shelter for the life of us. So, it was exponentially every single day. And the one thing my professor had said was, in order to create a personal brand, you have to survive. You have to be, you have to last long enough to be a memorable player.
Right.
And, so the whole time I was just, I went 13 days was the longest that I went without eating, but I lost 31 pounds in 33 days. That I was out there. And so this idea that every day, I mean, you talk about faith, every day was just like, God, give me enough faith for today, for the next 10 minutes. Right. That was like, and again, it was that work ethic showing up, that work ethic saying, how bad do you want it? Because the majority of people quit when it gets hard. And then you have a whole nother group of people who quit when it gets really hard. And then you have a whole nother, and now you're down to the 3%, who quit when it gets really, really hard. Are you the person who's willing just to get back up when it gets really, 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 really hard? Mm-hmm. Because anyone can have a dream, and day 13 of not eating, your dream starts looking really different. When you're like, I could tap out at any point and go back to an island that is filled with food and shelter and a warm bed and a warm shower, and saying, but the sacrifices I'm willing to make to get there, whatever I have to do today to get me to that place in a year, in 2 years, and put a sense of urgency on today, that's the secret sauce.
Wow, I love it. And so from Survivor, it really does give you that platform to do other things. Tell me about how then I Am That Girl begins to grow.
Yeah, it ended up, what was crazy, another blessing in disguise was that our season that it aired ended up being the only season during the writer's strike, which was years ago now. So it was normally, you're getting 4 or 5 million people watching a show every week, was suddenly 15 million people. It was just like an extreme amount of visibility. And I was on the show for every single episode. And so the minute that I got done, it was leveraging that. It was leveraging the opportunity to use Survivor and reality TV, more importantly, as a vehicle, to amplify a message, about girls and about why it's important that we have safe spaces to come, and why it's important for us to be able to have dialogue about the nuances and the hard things. So it was always interesting, because in interviews they'd be like, Alexis Jones from Survivor, what was it like eating rats and bats? And it's like, I could tell those stories, and I could say, like, oh, it's crazy. And who knew that bats have fur? Like, that's something I never thought about, until, and so it's like, I could tell those stories, and then I could always bring it back around to, anyway, I'm really excited. Right. And, what I learned in Survivor is really been applicable. I could always draw it back to, but this is really what I want to talk about. And I think that was kind of the piece of ingenuity of marketing and branding and understanding that things like influence and fame, it's just a tool. It's just a highlight. And so being able to put that flashlight on the things that matter, and being able to draw people's attention, and kind of learning how that game works, I think was kind of the fun strategery of it, kind of a Trojan horse.
There you go. Let's get a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about I Am That Girl and Protect Her. Alexis Jones is our guest, everybody. Stay with us. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Alexis Jones, and she's really, really inspiring us about having the faith to position yourself. Because if you don't show up, you can't be in position for God to bless you. And though everybody wants to point to Survivor, Survivor was just a means to get you to where God really wanted you to be. Mm-hmm. And he just used that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when you said positioning yourself. I think that's so instrumental. I think that's a big piece of it, because I think that self-doubt is very real, and the enemy is very real. And I think the enemy can really come in the form of not only self-doubt, but resentment, of that notion of life isn't fair. This isn't happening for me. And that's why I love the concept of co-authoring this life. At every moment, I have a belief system that I know that God is for me, regardless of the situation, that anything that is happening in my life, that it is not happening to me, even in my greatest heartbreak, my greatest disappointments and my hardest storms, that I have moments where I don't have to like it, but I always trust and surrender to the fact that it does transcend my current understanding. I don't have to know the why, but I know that just like when it rains outside, even if it rains 3 days straight, I'm like, the sun is going to come back. I know that. So I'm going to hold on to that belief system. And in the meantime, for me, I always know that there is something beautiful inside of that. And that coupled with that notion of, I'm also not waiting for something to happen to me. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get it.
I love that. I love that.
I think that living a life that way is actually confrontational to other people, and it creates a lot of haters. And what I've realized is it's not personal. They don't hate me. They hate the idea that what I represent is the discrepancy between the life that they're living and the life that they want to live. And the discrepancy between those two things is cavernous for some people.
Indeed.
And I represent that I'm not living two different lives. I'm living the life that I want to live because I'm showing up and I'm doing it every day. And haters who look at me and are like, oh, that's so easy. Everything just happens for her. And I'm like, no, that's the story you're telling yourself because you don't want to do the work. And that's fine. But then don't
hate me because I'm doing the work and I'm getting what God says that I was going to get.
Yeah, because I bust my buns every day and I know that. And so when people, look at my life and gloss over and have no idea who I am or any of my background or, because the lonely work, that's the stuff that goes unseen. It's the 12 hours a day sitting behind a computer trying to build a company. It's the waking up when I don't have a boss as an entrepreneur to get up and do it even when I don't feel motivated, even when I don't feel inspired, getting up and sitting at the table and saying, I'm going to write this book because this book is not going to write itself. And then when people say like, oh, things have just come so easy to her, I always laugh because I'm like, that's adorable.
What you say? That's adorable.
That's adorable.
So when you start to get this platform now, and I am that girl, and you build this community of probably more now, but approximately 1 million plus people joining that. Are you surprised when the miracle begins to happen and the things that God showed you start to manifest? Or do you just understand that this is what God showed me and this is what I expected?
Yeah, I think this is what I expected. I joke that it's a combination of both my mom brainwashing me into thinking that I could actually do anything in the entire world. Which is really funny. The only other time I've ever heard that story come forward was around Venus Williams and Serena. And they're basically like, no, our dad brainwashed us into thinking we were going to be the best tennis players in the entire world. And I feel the same way that I'm like, my mom was always like, you can do anything you want, anything. And so when things would happen, and I'd always be like, well, of course, because Mom told me that if I was willing to work hard enough, if I was willing to show up, if I was willing to get back up, if I was willing to keep the faith in the darkness, like this was possible. So I think that is, being able to stay on track with your vision, even when it gets hard. Like, it's a long journey. It's a marathon. And what are the things that you need to do to keep you hydrated, to keep you nourished throughout that process? And so much of that are the humans that you're surrounded by that you put in your life. And not everyone was born a billionaire in love the way that I was with my family. And I recognize that. And that is absolutely one of my superpowers. But the idea that we get to choose our family, we get to decide who gets access to us. We get to edit the people in our lives that edify us or don't. And I take that very seriously.
Wow.
I take the caliber of people in my life very seriously.
So tell me about being featured as Oprah's Super Soul 100. How does that happen?
I mean, that's just one of those. I got the email and I was like,
I got the email.
I was like, they were like, can you come out to Los Angeles? And I was like, oh, I mean, I feel like in my career, I've had these little moments that are just God winks, that are just, girl, you're on the right path. I told you. Didn't I tell you? Mm-hmm. And that felt like one of those where God was like, didn't I tell you? This is your path. This is what's happening. And so the first time I met her, of course, I mean, she's she's Oprah. That's all you have to say. She's a queen, And so I think, and she actually came up from behind me and she was like, oh, I love your jumpsuit, and she was like, who makes this? And it was what I loved about my first interaction with her was she was so familiar and she was so comfortable and casual. And it wasn't this formality of like, hello, I am it was like, girl, I love your jumpsuit. And she like starts looking at my tag and I knew it was her because of course I recognized her voice, but it was because it was from behind me. And she starts, she like goes like this, like you would do to one of your best friends that you're like, oh, I love your shirt. Who makes this? Where'd you get this from? And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, and I think I was just like in shock. I don't think I moved for like 20 seconds. And I was like, oh, and she was like, oh, okay. And then I turned and I'm like, hello. And she's like, I mean, is your hair just naturally like that? Or like, she was just so comfortable. And it's just one of those things where, yeah, it was, I had to pinch myself for sure.
What about Netflix and your journey with this whole idea of the most successful show in the history of Netflix?
That was another one of those projects where I think too often, and especially in today's society, we look at fame and success and financial wealth as the end goal. And I was always told that those are byproducts of doing what you do really well. And those are byproducts of doing what you're meant to do and sharing your gifts and talents in using your highest and best. And so I was sent this book. I met this woman. I was speaking at the United States of Women conference that the White House was putting on. And there was a woman there was an executive producer in Hollywood. And we crossed paths. And at that point, I had already launched Protector, which was working in locker rooms with boys on the importance of respecting women. And she stopped me and said, wait, are you Alexis? I've heard so much about your work. I'm working on this new project. I want to know if you want to be involved. And it was a very quick interaction. And I said, sure. Yeah, here's my number. Here's my email, whatever. And she sent me this book called 13 Reasons Why. And she said, read it first. If you're interested, if the story resonates, it would be an honor to work with you. We really want you to be a part of this project. And I read the book and it's everything. It's a fictional story of everything that I'm dealing with on a regular basis and have been for the past decade and a half of what's happening in high schools and in colleges, anywhere from self-harm to suicide to sexual assault, and really grappling with the hard truths of what our youth are dealing with and exposed to every day today. And so, of course, I called her and I said, this story has never been more important. And even though it's going to be hard and as an activist, I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a massive backlash because you're going to speak truth. And you're going to provide this fictional story as vehicles and characters for us to really dive into this stuff that people don't want to talk about and people don't want to admit is happening. And if you're willing to handle that backlash and handle the critique and handle the haters and the judgment and people saying, you're glamorizing or glorifying these horrible situations, if you're willing to stomach that, I would absolutely come on board. Because I think this is some of the bravest storytelling that we can be talking about right now. And what's amazing is when you take on a project like that, because you feel like it's the right thing to do and you feel it's important, then when it became, it launched in 190 countries the day it went live. And we're now in our third season. We're about to drop our third season of 13 Reasons Why. And it's exciting. It's exciting when then you have that level of success. I mean, that's crazy.
How do you personally stay rooted and grounded in a world of things and people being so filled, as you said, with money and success being the end game? How do you stay rooted and grounded in your faith?
I think that, again, that goes back to like, who is your crew? Who's your posse? Who's your wolf pack? As Abby Wambach would say with her new book. Who are the people you're surrounded by? I went to dinner last night with 4 of my very best girlfriends. So when I came home and I was talking to my husband and I said, how lucky am I that 4 of my best friends, I went to LA for 10 years, lived in Europe for a couple of years, moved back to Austin, my hometown where my husband and I both grew up. I said, how lucky am I that 4 of my best friends were girls that I went to middle school and high school with? That I have this relationship and that they knew super awkward 11-year-old Lex before I ever did any of the work that I did. And I think it's having those kinds of relationships of people, not necessarily who have that kind of history with you, but are willing to hold you accountable to who they know you want to be. And you create the kind of dialogue and the kind of vulnerability that Brene Brown talks about, where you're willing to rumble with each other when and if, as my dad says, when and if you get too big for your britches. And I think I have a family and you know, my siblings and my parents, and I'm so dedicated to the work that I do. And I recognize, again, back to the conversation, I know that the Lord has always had a big life for me and a big impact. And I've carried the weight of that since I was, I think, 9 years old. And my mom came in and said, "What are you doing?" I was talking to a mirror up close, and I turned and looked at her and I said, "I'm practicing my acceptance speech." And she said, "Oh, for what?" And I said, "When I become the president of the United States." And so from the time that I was 9, there was this weight on my life in the most beautiful way. My grandmother always said, you know, with big opportunity comes huge responsibility. So I think lining myself with this army of people who I say, I need your help, because, again, back to my mom, to bring the conversation full circle, you know, if we think that we're above the temptation of getting kidnapped by our ego, if we think that the enemy isn't real, if we think that compulsion to darkness isn't available, if the invitation isn't available any minute of every day, then we've already lost. And I think by having people who are around me, holding my feet down, even in the moments where I'm like, aren't I a big deal? I'm kicking it at Oprah's house.
Aren't I a big deal?
You know, like, isn't this like, oh my God, I'm working on the biggest show in Hollywood. Like, there are moments, and what I also love about best friends is like, there are moments where I'm like, can you believe this? Like, can we geek out about this for a minute? And it's like, yeah, okay. And then it's like, anyway, so how's your mom doing? How's your, you know, the other stuff has to matter the same amount, if not more.
I love it. I love it. Alexis, thank you for giving us so much of your time and so much of yourself and your heart. This has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before you go, tell people how they can connect with I Am That Girl and protect her.
They can go to iamthatgirl.com, and they can also go to protecther.com. And socials are the same, at I Am That Girl, at Protector, and for me individually, it's at MISS, Miss Alexis Jones.
There you go. Hey, everybody. Alexis Jones has been our guest. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. We can't thank Alexis Jones enough for sharing her time and her talent, and most importantly, her passion with our listeners and our viewers. I'm going to tell you, when you sit and you listen to Alexis's story, she speaks to that word that I can't stop saying, possibility. No matter where we come from, if we have the tenacity and the courage to keep doing the work, to keep getting up whenever we fall and never quit, the possibilities are endless. But even bigger than that, she speaks to the love, the affection, and the power that women have when we come together. But not just coming together in love, respect, and honor. The reason why we do this show every single day is so incredibly simple. It's for conversations like this. And it's because we love you. But we know that God loves us exponentially, even more than that. So we have got to purpose in our hearts to love ourselves and to love others. Mahatma Gandhi said it, and I say it daily. Be the change that you want to see, and know that change can only start with you and with me. For the entire crew and team of On Point Talk Television, don't forget, go to our YouTube page, On Point Talk TV. Like, subscribe, share, and remember, leave us your comments. Have a great, safe day. God willing, we'll see you right back here next time.